Hello everybody, today it is time for another awesome tag video. I got tagged in the, the no disclaimers tag, which, I think was designed around the idea that on BookTube and in general life, no one wants to offend anybody, right? You don't want to be aggressive. And so this kind of created a space where you can kind of say what you want without caveats. Now, not whatever you want. Obviously, if it's hate-filled or whatever, it's not good. But a kind of space to say some unpopular opinions you might have, or not couch anything you say in well, even though I don't like this, this, or this. So there's kind of a overall disclaimer of I might have more to say on this, but for this tag, specifically, I'm not going to give any disclaimers or any sort of anything like that. Which trope in books annoy you the most? A lot of people have said this, and I agree that it is the miscommunication trope, where major plot points are because two interpersonal people don't communicate. And I don't mean necessarily they don't communicate in a wide amount. Malazan, one of my favorite storylines is that two generals just aren't able to communicate because they're too far away, and it builds this tension of this campaign is probably going to go wrong because these two guys can't physically can't communicate because they're across the different continents from each other. That's not what I mean by communication. I mean someone overhears someone talking about how they don't like this other person. They get really upset, so they don't tell that other person something, but really it was just they were lying to that person because they were a bad person. So if they had just confronted their friend and been hey, why'd you say that? There literally would be no plot point. I hate those. Generally, those are shown in love triangles, which is why I don't like love triangles. Love triangles can be incredibly interesting. The classic love triangle of Sir Lancelot, King Arthur, and Guinevere is incredibly fascinating, especially when both parties love each other. It actually is a love triangle, not just a love, seesaw? Something. Next question, for sure the one I'm gonna get flack for. What writer is the most overhyped, overrated, whatever you said? It is absolutely Brandon Sanderson. I think that's not debatable. Even if you like Brandon Sanderson, I think you have to admit that he is way overblown in his popularity as opposed to other writers. For instance, Robin Hobb is an incredible writer, and in my sense, miles better than Brandon Sanderson, but her fandom is not even close to the fandom of Brandon Sanderson or the Stormlight Archive, even in particular. I will post something on Robin Hobb, it'll do okay, I'll put it on the Reddit where there's 1,000 people, we'll have good conversations. It's nothing compared to the fandom of Stormlight Archive. I just don't understand the difference between those. I think Stormlight Archive is fine. My thoughts on these are in all of the reviews that I've done. You can check those out. I think there are some major problems with it, even though it's a fun series. But I don't understand why it has sort of taken over the modern fantasy movement like it has. Sorry, I just don't understand it. What are your least favorite books you've read since joining BookTube? So for me, one of the things that I was led to early on was I wanted to read some classics that I hadn't read that a lot of people said inspired them. One that I really didn't like was the David Eddings Bulgariad, which starts with Pawn of Prophecy as the first one, and it was just so bland. I actually like classic fantasy quite a lot, sort of the Lord of the Rings stuff, but I just thought the Bulgariad was incredibly bland, incredibly slow-moving. Again, Lord of the Rings is one of my favorites. It's not like I don't like slow-moving books, but it just grinded so slowly. What is a terrible ending that ruined an otherwise good book? This, I thought particularly of The Sword of Kaigan here, but not because it ruined the book. Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang is a tremendous book that I would recommend everyone to read, but the final chapter in that book goes beyond sort of the story that was being told in Sword of Kaigan to set up some other stuff and tie off some loose ends that didn't need tying off, and it was very long, and it Sword of Kaigan without that last chapter is a masterpiece. Probably my favorite standalone fantasy ever, period, end of sentence. But that last chapter was so both long and sort of took the punch and heart out of a lot of the book that kind of got relegated just very, very good. Still really like Sword of Kaigan, but that is definitely a book where I think the ending really hurt the overall effect of the book. Number 5, which fictional character was killed off that you wish hadn't been killed off? Now, I don't know why this is a question because it's just gonna spoil things. So I'm gonna talk about something that happens in the realm of the Elderlings, because there's 2 deaths in there that I think actually I'm not a huge fan of. So if you haven't read the realm of the Elderlings, the 2 particulars I'm going to talk about are spoilers in the Assassin's Apprentice, so the first one, something that happens in Fool's Errand, which is the first book in the Tawny Man trilogy. So come back or skip ahead to the next question if you don't want those spoilers. Here we go. 2 deaths in Realm of the Elderlings that I think are probably necessary for the story of Fitz, but I think there's also a lot of really interesting stuff that could happen to them. The first death happens in the Farseer trilogy. I really wanted some more chivalry. I know he's supposed to be sort of this big, mythic, mystical, mysterious, a lot of M's, figure, but I thought it'd be very interesting to delve down into why he gave up Fitz, what really happened with Fitz's mom. And who knows, I haven't finished the Elderlings, so maybe that's going to come back around, or he's going to be another character, but at this moment, I'm sad that the story that could have been told with chivalry isn't. The same, to a smaller degree, is true of Verity, because his death really sets things up for later in the series that I think is necessary, but I think he's a great character that I really wanted more of. Then, of course, this is a Fool's Errand, spoiler alert, incredibly sad Night Eyes died, and wanted him to continue, for sure. Yeah, Robin Hobb hurts the heart every time. What are some of your bookish pet peeves? I think I saw a couple people say these. One, there's some new in vogue like trade paperbacks that are like high and long. Dresden does this a lot. I don't know why Jim Butcher does this. I mean, it's his publisher. I'm sure he's not doing it. But like, it's this weird high and long instead of like the regular trade paperback. I am not a huge fan of that at all. I don't like modern, like lazy covers. Actually, since I'm getting up and showing you. So just 2 modern book covers here. We've got Dance with Dragons, which is a Song of Ice and Fire, obviously the last one that has been released. Then we've got Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Both huge authors, tons of money in these publications, and just like a thing that's there, an axe just standing in the void, and an emblem, brass emblem, standing in the void. Like, what is this? This is horrible. And compare that with some classic stuff like maybe like Wheel of Time covers, which are gorgeous, so much detail. Like, I love the illustration. Same with like this classic Redwall. This isn't even like a huge book, but it's got this beautiful illustration. Like, this is so much better than something else that you could have. I don't know why you would do that. And everything Michael Whalen has done, just like, come on, so much better. So that's a huge pet peeve of mine, lazy book covers. Like, you can pay for one artist to do a beautiful cover. Game of Thrones. What are some books you feel should get more recognition? This is gonna surprise nobody when I say Malazan Book of the Fallen. And here's what I mean by that. Obviously, it's a series that people know. Some of them have been on the New York Times bestseller list. The early volumes have won some awards. But I think still to this day, I mean, before I say anything else, you watching, what do you think of when you hear Malazan? Put it in the comments below. I'm guessing there's one of 2 answers for that. So put your answer below before I say this, because I want to test my theory. 1, people who have read it are going to say, yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. Well, I guess there's 3 possible ones. 1, I read it, enjoyed it, loved Malazan. 2, I read the first one, I was a little confused by it and didn't keep going. Or 3, oh, that's just like a very like specific type of fantasy that like I don't think I would like. It seems very confusing, very like off-putting kind of thing. And I think Rhythma, actually, my friend Rhythma did a really good job with her video of like expectations versus reality with the Malazan books. I think it just, their reputation, I think, unfortunately, is as like this very unapproachable, tough to read, intimidating work. Which in some ways, like, it's hard to read, but like, So is Lord of the Rings, you know? Some people struggle with that, but it doesn't have this unapproachable reception like Malazan has up to this day. I think that's starting to change as more and more people read it, as more people talk about it, because I do think it's accessible. It's not the easiest thing to read, but I think it is accessible, and I think more people need to read it. Obviously, I think it's a masterpiece. It's my favorite fantasy of all time, potentially my favorite book of all time as a whole, and so I just think it needs a lot more readership. I think a lot more people need to give it a chance and not be as intimidated. In my opinion, it is far less intimidating than Wheel of Time. It has less books, it is much more driven, has much better highs, is more consistently good. I don't know why more people are willing to slog through Wheel of Time than they are to slog through Malazan, because I think Malazan just is a better series and rewards you better more consistently. So there you go. If you're thinking about I need to really tackle Wheel of Time, I know the TV show is coming out, so I know people might want to do that, but I would recommend if you really want the best reading experience, Malazan is much more worth a sort of grin and bear it, if that's what you want to call it, big series commitment. Do Malazan. Maybe a less known version that I should say is the Lynn Llewellyn Night Runner series. I'm currently reading with my friend Chris over at Chris Bookish Cauldron. It's just a delightful book with great main characters in Alec and Sarah Gill. I think more people should be reading it. It's sort of one of those female author fantasy series from the 90s that for some reason didn't have the longevity as some of these other male-written books for some reason. The Night Runner series by Lynn Llewellyn, the first one's called Luck in the Shadows. Definitely would recommend. It's a really great read and pretty quick and easy. The final question is kind of a weird one. What are your thoughts on, censorship and banning books? I mean, no one's really for censorship at all, but it's a more complicated question than I really want to jump in just on a final tag question. But generally, most people, I am not into censoring or banning books. Thank you guys for watching. Let me know in the comments below, again, your perceptions of Malazan, anything else you might have. First in, last out.